Welcome back. Now, it seems like the nickel mining industry is under pressure, with major players like BHP and South32 reassessing their exposure to the asset. And joining me now as we discuss this in greater detail is Director of Mining at Modern Corporate Solutions, Peter Major. Peter, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Maybe let's start there. Let's start by putting things into perspective. What is happening in that industry? Prices seem to be stable, but they were coming down at the beginning of the year. The market also seems to be in oversupply. What is causing this? Is this, on the back of the current economic conditions? Is it industry specific?
No, I think it's nickel specific.
Aha.
And nickel, it's a sexy sounding metal. It's a sexy looking metal. But it's a tricky metal to make all your money in because it's more often trading below the average than above it. And I compare it with cobalt. Cobalt is a very sexy, pretty, and very useful metal, but the demand is a little bit specific, as you mentioned a minute ago. And it's a narrower demand than for most other metals. And so you look at the average price of cobalt, the average price of nickel, they seem to trade below the average for a long, long time. Then they shoot up. All of a sudden, there's a shortage of it. All of a sudden, there's a new use of it. And then they shoot up very, very high. And everybody thinks, wow, we got to mine nickel. This is a money maker extraordinaire. But by the time they get into it, nickel comes down. It doesn't have a long upward trend, and it's usually above its average, like, say, copper. Or even if you look at zinc and lead, they're not very sexy, zinc and lead. They have a few highs, but they don't have very many lows. They usually trade at this average price that's gone on for decades in real terms. But yeah, nickel, it was really rushed at when the electric car craze got a hold of everybody a few years ago. And it had a great spur to about 15, 20 years ago as well. But it dies down too quick. It doesn't stay up. And this is a big nickel plant, Cerro. It's self-contained. Not only do they mine it, but they mill it and they smelt it. So they send out a very pure, refined nickel. But again, you were correct. You said, is there too much? Yes. Indonesia produces so much nickel as a byproduct from their iron ore that the Chinese are the main recipient of that. There is more nickel than there is demand, and that's driven the price quite a ways below. Its average price over 100 years is probably 40,000, and it's trading at 15.
And talk to me about those demand-supply dynamics in greater detail, Peter. You touched on Indonesia and that country, accounting for the about 60% of global nickel production, and how that is playing out into China, as we have been seeing, slowing demand for the metal.
Yeah. Indonesia has a lot of people, in case we forget. And they have a lot of metal, such as copper, nickel, and coal. They have really, really increased their coal and their nickel production. And if you look at the industries, I don't have the stats with me, but the demand for nickel in batteries, it fluctuates. At least cobalt and lithium, we need it in batteries all the time. Nickel is an alternative. There's nickel cadmium, there's nickel cobalt. So people are experimenting with ways of getting around having to use nickel. And that's driven the price down quite a bit. Are there other uses? It's good for an alloy, but I think it's the auto and battery industry that's probably taken the brunt of this. And we know electric cars now aren't quite the rage that they were. And so people are not having to supply as many batteries. And all of a sudden, You've got excess production come out of Indonesia because they've got so many people that they're doing any business they can, and nickel's one of them.
All right, and then is that why we are seeing then the some of the world's biggest miners kind of diversifying away from nickel? You mentioned South32 and that group selling its Cerro Matoso operation. We also have BHP that recently announced that they'll be divesting out of a nickel project in Tanzania. Could you see this being a trend in the industry, perhaps more miners ditching some of their nickel assets?
You're correct. It is a trend in the industry. A lot of diversified players are saying, why are we in this metal? It's very volatile.
Yeah.
And even though the average long-term price is 20, as Peter Major said, it's below 20 a lot more often than it's above. When it's above 20, yes, it shoots way up, gets as high as 40, 50, 60,000 a ton, but only stays up there for a year or two. So it's too volatile. There's too much of it. The uses are not keeping up with the new production. Botswana had a huge nickel smelter, possibly the biggest in the world. I think it was. But they could never justify the cost of reopening a fairly deep underground mine, getting the smelter going, getting the mill going. The capital it would take to get that going doesn't justify it because the price doesn't stay high enough long enough. I made a mistake earlier. The long-term price is 20, not 40. Yeah, when it's 40, people are making money. So yeah, BHP, they don't need this. It's more of a headache than an income revenue generator for them. And certainly it generates even less profits for them than their average operation in something dull and boring like copper and iron ore.
Yeah. All right, let's leave it there, Peter. Thanks so much for your time and just taking us through the dynamics, playing out in the nickel mining industry. And that was Peter Major, Director of Mining at Modern Corporate Solutions.